Ready?
Oh. Oh my god.
Soften it. I have that conspiracy theory that like the elite of the world are actually lizard people. I'm a lizard person.
I remember translating a Latin text where like everyone was lizards or something.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know that far back.
I love cafes. All the clinks of silverware, the pounding of the portafilter to empty out the used espresso, the merry chatter of strangers meeting up with family and friends, and the high-pitched excitement when Toby realizes there's another border collie a few feet away from him. Drift Coffee and Kitchen reminds me why I love listening to the busyness of kitchens in the background as I work. I grew up doing my homework on the kitchen table as I lived in apartments for most of my life. Hearing my mom move around the pots and pans as she prepped dinner became soothing for me. And now whenever I hear those sounds, I think back to those days, those simpler days, those days on the south side of Chicago, where my family and I lived in a rather tight space. Along with its lovely ambiance, Drift has stellar coffee. My order is always an Americano with coconut milk on the side. The quality is consistent and the size of the mugs that the coffee comes in are what they should be. I was curious to bring along my sketch pad for our little visit to Drift this week. It's been rather wet outside again, and well, I still wanted to get somewhat of an outdoor sketch in before tackling the penultimate assignment for the week-long course that I've signed up for. Since we were seated next to the counter with all the encased baked goods and syrups on top, I took the chance and made it my reference. How was this gonna go? No idea. Was I apprehensive about my husband bringing out the camera and filming? Of course I was. Did I catch people looking over at us as I sketched? Yep. And it made me uneasy. Was I trying my best to get the sketch out so we can put away the camera? 100% yes. Every time the waitress came by, I felt the need to move my sketch pad to the side and spread my right hand across the page to cover up what I was attempting to sketch. Embarrassment is what I felt, which is the exact opposite of what sketching makes me feel while I practice it at home. This feeling of embarrassment has a history with me. I was a naturally shy kid, which means any attention on me was not okay. That shyness, however, eventually faded. But the feeling of embarrassment replaced it because I grew up to believe that I wasn't perfect enough for deserving the spotlight. As you might all assume, I haven't possessed the healthiest self-esteem and even struggle with it now. Sitting in Drift, sketching away reminds me how I still fall into the chase for perfectionism, just like Toby falls into the endless chase for a tennis ball. And speaking of Toby, he has made it to the Wall of Fame here in Drift. While we still have to pay for his puppuccinos, the staff at Drift are not stingy on the whipped cream. The term perfection is from the Latin perfecere. The Cambridge Dictionary defines perfection as the state of being complete and correct in every way. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary describes perfection as freedom from fault or defect. Upon reading those definitions, I can't help but think how absurd they are for us human beings, whose nature is to be flawed and be in endless growth as we learn from our flaws. Is there really any freedom from fault or defect? Once again, that sounds so unnatural. Isn't freedom about learning from our faults and feeling proud of the scars they have left on us? Because it's the scars that made us more human, more empathetic, more compassionate, more understanding? Why would the Cambridge Dictionary pair perfection with being correct? First of all, perfection is subjective, and secondly, being correct doesn't mean a person is flawless. And why would a person want to be correct all the time? They would learn nothing from the world and its many cultures. They would cripple themselves. Everyone on this earth has made plenty of mistakes, and not a single person on this earth holds all the knowledge about everything, which means no one can be correct all the time. So, with all this in mind, why do we still want to reach for perfection? Why do I criticize my best efforts and still long for error-free sketches? We all have different answers to that question. Mine would be tied to my need to always do better and be in absolute control of doing better. What does that mean? Well, it pretty much means that I'm first gen. This is how I describe the first gen experience. And what does first gen mean? First gen means your parents are immigrants and you were born in the country that your parents fled to and settled in. It means that you're the first in many situations. You are the first to graduate from university. You are the first to have a white-collar job. You are the first to pursue a postgraduate degree. You are the first to run a business. You are the first to begin using your voice in spaces that were not designed for you. You are the first to have the prospect of creating generational wealth. But most importantly, being first gen means not fitting in. Not being from here or there, ni de aquí, ni de allá, as the saying goes. Not fitting in is associated with the chase for perfection. As a brown person, I've carried the responsibility, like most of my black and brown sisters and brothers, to look and be perfect, so that I'm not blamed for not representing my community in the best way possible in spaces that matter, such as educational spaces and workspaces. I grew up understanding that perfection was me trying to catch up with my white counterpart. I wanted to be on an even playing field with them because I felt like I would be successful then. I didn't know any better. I didn't know how wrong it was to be chasing a seat at their table when the table was never made for me. The pressure I felt to be perfect began when I was super young. I remember being in the second grade and consuming all the grammar workbooks because the English language was a medium that I could use to fit in, and I wanted to fit in seamlessly, perfectly. I have a vivid memory of being 11 years old and having to work on a project with a couple of my classmates. Because I kept trying to fix the presentation of our project, one of them commented why I always had to make everything look perfect. I didn't answer because I really believe that those who didn't chase for perfection were just being lazy. Mistakes were hard for me to get over. I always wanted linear progress, which is quite the opposite of the path I've chosen for my art journey. As you might all know, I've found myself drawn to sketching using ink and watercolor. I ended up finding an amazing teacher who believes in loose lines and creating a visual language that doesn't replicate reality. His name is Toby Sketchloose. The sketch that you're seeing me work on is from a lesson of Toby's course. The reference is a photo of a house that Toby took on his trip to Japan. Toby embraces mistakes and even has stated that mistakes have sometimes been one of the best features to have developed in his sketches. I've seen him move his pen around the page without the intention of making perfect angles for buildings or perfect shapes for landscapes, and yet the scenes that he creates are lovely. He lets the water play with the page to capture his vision and lets it guide him to completion. I'm a bit surprised that Toby has won me over. This has nothing to do with his teaching abilities, which are excellent, by the way. It's just that his style is not the controlled and error-free practice that a younger version of myself would have gone for. I'm sometimes confused by it, but then I get it. You see, I've not lived my life like this, making something beautiful from my mistakes without immediately spiraling from actually making the mistake in the first place. It has either been I have complete control over something, or I rather not attempt it. And if I do attempt it, I have kind of made a half-ass attempt at it. Because this approach to life has become quite exhausting, I think when the time came to find a focus again and really commit to the most free version of myself, I wanted a way into art that felt organic, fun and messy, the imperfect, the loose lines. Working on this house, I was a bit concerned about the application of watercolor. Earlier in the week, Toby taught me how to mix watercolors so that when I would apply brush to paper, the colors would appear less busy and less heavy. I ended up realizing that I wasn't applying enough water to my watercolors when I was mixing them. And secondly, I've been using brushes that are not meant for watercolors. Am I a beginner or what, friends? Don't you all worry though, I've placed an order for watercolor brushes already. Toby also gave me a few tips on how to allow the watercolors to dance on the page without having to do much on my part. So basically, by applying water first on the section I want to color, and then tapping some color onto my brush, and then applying it to the wet section on the page, I create a soft movement of color on the page that forms shapes and spreads itself thin in some areas. When it dries, its subtleness is effective in making you feel something. It's not trying hard to make you feel something either. It's perfectly imperfect. As I've been working with pen and no more with pencil, I'm happy to announce that it no longer feels weird starting my sketch with pen only. Toby's mistake-embracing approach has soothed my fear of accidental squiggles. It wasn't until Toby explained that pencil takes away the development of the scene in a way. Lines become restricted and then seem to lose their ability to hold character. And so I think that's when creativity begins to get tied down and becomes less experimentative. Friends, are you just impressed as I am that you can pretty much make all the colors you want with just a 12-piece watercolor set? Here I was thinking that I would need a larger set soon, but I don't think there will be a need for that for a while. While I don't have watercolor brushes as I work on the sketch, I'm using what I have. I'm using a rather big brush for the first application of color onto the house. For all the trees and plants, I opted for a smaller brush. I'm a big fan of earthy colors, so being able to make an array of different greens for this sketch was quite enjoyable. Although my art journey has been helping me embrace my mistakes on the page, I can't say that I've been able to apply that same message across other aspects of my life. And that's not to say I believe that perfectionism is still worth the chase. It's not, friends. But the pressures that came with the way that I experienced perfectionism have had a lasting impact on my mental health. Rewiring your logic is tricky. I had grown used to chasing perfectionism so much that it became a comfort. I lost that comfort when I chose to reroute for the first time and second time. Were there moments when I thought I couldn't handle the uncertainty of being free from the expectation of being the ideal, or should I say the perfect first gen who graduates from university, rises up the corporate ladder, buys a home, has a family, and begins a life where she can generate generational wealth? Being a first gen that makes it, that doesn't cause trouble, that stays quiet within the boundaries of her cultural safety. Absolutely. There were many moments of those. The pressures to be perfect has defined my narrative, and I know I'm not alone. Cultural pressures and the pressures of westernized society left a strong enough imprint that I now have a history of burdening myself with these pressures. Of course, I can unlearn them, and I've been doing so with the help of a therapist. However, the battle is hard. especially with the divisiveness of our society right now. When powerful white men still use eugenics to justify that people who look like me can never be enough, or as good as they are, or just turn bad. As a first gen, navigating those waters can be painful and frustrating. I grew up during a time when there wasn't representation out there, and the first gen experience wasn't being studied, or it wasn't even considered something worth talking about. It was a me issue. I felt this way because I needed to change, because I wasn't perfect yet. I'm blessed that I'm seeing more and more Latine authors sharing their first gen experience. It's authors like Prisca Dorcas Mojica Rodriguez and Alma Zaragoza Petty who have let me know that I wasn't the only brown girl feeling out of place or hurt. That the first gen experience requires interdisciplinary study to fully grasp what it is. With all that said, it's not impossible to unlearn these ways of perfectionism. I'm glad sketching came into my life. It's a reminder to let go and embrace the messy. It helps keep me unlearning what has been embedded in me. Sketching is healing me one piece at a time. I do have to say that I still need to learn how to schedule my sketching time. I'm still at the stage where I think I could start a sketch and have it wrapped up in like 10 minutes. Friends, that is not the case. The process usually looks like ink, watercolor, break, watercolor, break, ink. The breaks are there so that the first application of watercolor has time to dry before you add more color. All colors can't be added at the same time because you'll end up with an unattractive mess. And because the watercolor fades the initial ink lines a bit, and I want certain lines to stand out more, I have to use my pen a second time, which is usually the very last step. I believe it takes about 45 minutes or less for my water applications to dry. So it's become somewhat of a slow process, and I'm enjoying it. And since I'm using the way the watercolors naturally settle on the page like Toby suggests, I'm finding it easier to apply the theme less is more. I was skeptical about the sketch because of the way the house is designed. I didn't know whether I could give the scene any dimension. I'm always concerned about making sketches that look flat. I have to check the lines of my reference photos so many times to ensure that there will be life to my sketch. With this sketch, I think I overdid the sky a bit. I should have applied more water to the page before I applied the blue, so the blue would have spread more easily on its own. And perhaps the coloring on the pole was beginning to get too out of hand. I overcorrected a bit. Oops. I'm actually pretty chuffed about the house and all the greenery. There's a variation of textures and colors. I think I'm headed in the right direction. And now with being on Toby's ink and watercolor course, I can get his feedback on my sketches, which should be so helpful. Friends, thank you for stopping by and joining me as I sketched. While I know that we all use the saying, practice makes perfect out of habit, perhaps we should change it up. Perhaps we should stop using any form of the word perfect altogether, since it is not in our human nature to be so. Maybe that saying should be, practice makes you shine. Maybe then we can slowly relieve ourselves of the cultural and societal pressures from the past and even the present ones. Friends, grab your art supplies and make all the mistakes on your page, canvas, etc. Get your hands dirty, get paint in your hair, add some color to your jeans, but maybe not your favorite pair. Mistakes have allowed me to heal. Mistakes have empowered my authenticity. Mistakes have set me free. Embrace the mistakes, friends, and let's see each other next week when I will have more mistakes to share.